It is your perceived relative expertise rather than your actual expertise that matters. And so, in order to maintain your credibility, right? When you go out there and you wander into the public sphere, right? So in academia, we're generally pretty good about this. We say, you know, we can objectively say your credibility, as long as you've never falsified data, you've never been caught in some sort of scientific scandal, right? You do good work, you do good science, you publish great papers, all right, you're credible. Okay? But when you go out in the rest of the world, that's not how it works. And so what you need to be aware of is the safest way to protect yourself is stick to what you know and make your recommendations based on facts. Say, the data says X, right? And it's important to do this, right? And how you do this is sort of messy, right? We were talking about, like, you don't just want to give people the raw data, you want to be able to sell it to them. But don't do it in such a way that they think that you're trying to manipulate them, or that you don't really mean what you say. And this is where Bill Nye got himself into trouble. Is basically, he has a great science background, he's an engineering scientist, but he made a value-based statement that he can't point to data and say, the data says this, right? This is where that separation has to take place. If you're going to make a value-based statement, you have to step out of your scientist, you have to take off your scientist and engineer hat, and you step into your, I'm an individual. I am now speaking as a citizen of the United States. I am speaking as a mother or a sister or a father or a brother or whoever, right? You have to put on that hat and say, I am saying this because this is what matters to me. I am not saying this value-based statement because that's what science says. Because that's what the scientific community says. Because you tarnish your own reputation, you tarnish your own credibility. Not just you as a person, but all of the science that you have done comes into question, and you tarnish the reputation of scientists in general. All right, scary? A little scary? Yeah. Okay. That said, you can do it. All right? It is incredibly, incredibly important for all of us to find a way to be involved. You don't have to go and work for the government directly. You don't have to go and take my path where I'm trying to work at a think tank and make appeals to congressmen directly. Right? Just engage with the public. Engage with your neighbors. Start small. Right? But take your science and don't be afraid to make it human. And if we don't get actively involved, right, scientists are pulled away because we don't like this. It's messy, it's socially messy, we are afraid. And then you end up with a lot of people who are shouting a lot louder. If our voices are absent from the conversation, we're leaving the discussion to be dominated by people that I don't think we really want the discussion to be dominated by. Okay? And so this is my joke I'm referring to Wally as, I'm hoarding my knowledge in case I ever need it. Well, guess what? Everybody else needs it. Don't worry. Sure. I have some links. If people are interested, I'd be happy to share with them. I have even more that are sort of messier to follow these. These are a really good place to start. There's tons of links within each one of these. And so I'm going to end with that. I hope you enjoy it. More questions? Has anybody even thought about going to public policy for this? What? Hooray! I didn't even know it existed, right? Like before I went, well, I found out about the AAAS. They have a fellowship program specifically for science and engineering PhDs. You know, if you want to get into public policy and you go through a lot of other channels, it seems like you need a law degree or you need a social work degree or health, you know, some sort of other degree rather than PhDs. That's not true. There are tons of places for people who have science and engineering PhDs of all kinds to basically get involved in public policy. And so you don't have to go and say, oh, I got my PhD, now I'm going to go get another degree. Right? Your scientific expertise is needed because your skills beyond just what you do on the bench, beyond what your specific project is, if you can learn how to communicate with people and sort of take the high-level view and sort of communicate, hey, my science is really cool, my science is really important, and be able to technically analyze, right? So if somebody else comes in and say, hey, my science is really cool, my science is really important, you should fund me, and you look at it and you say, well, yeah, but, right? You have that advantage over people who don't have the scientific background and can't do those types of analyses. So you can sell yourself as somebody who is a problem solver, as a communicator, and somebody who has the technical expertise to understand the really complicated problems that we are facing, that lawmakers are having to make public policy on, even though they don't have the background to really dig through it. Yes, Peter.
So, what do you suggest to do about the whole confirmation bias problem? Like, people just read basically what will validate their own viewpoint. Like you say, talk to the press, but a lot of people will only read press that already confirms what they already believe. So the people that you're trying to change their mind, you don't even get to them because it automatically gets filtered out.
So, do you have a comment, follow-up comment?
You can give them the right arguments.
Right, I mean, so that's really the best that you can do. And I think a lot of it, part of what I see, and I think what a lot of other people discussed at the conference about the frustrating environment that we are experiencing in Congress. Like, this has been the least productive Congress in, I don't know how many years, right? In terms of the number of the bills that were put forward versus the number of bills that actually made it through, tiny percentage. And a lot of it comes down to people standing on their side of the aisle, and their version of reaching across the aisle is doing this, right? That's not reaching across the aisle. And so if we are incredibly politicized in our environment, yeah, then people are basically going to say, I'm only going to accept things that are friendly towards my argument. But I think a lot of that also starts with how you approach people, right? If people are automatically sensitized to expecting an attack when they present a particular argument or when they present a particular worldview, you have to convince them that you're not going to immediately bite their head off just because they disagree with you. And that's not easy. I see one of my friends looking at me and saying that this is something that I need to work on. Right? This is I can stand up here and tell you it's not easy. But it's the recognition that patience is sometimes a virtue, which is really frustrating. We look at Congress and say nothing's getting done. And part of it is also understanding that being frustrated, yeah, it seems like nothing's getting done. Things move at a different pace. Things move much more slowly than what we're used to, even in academia. And compared to business, academia moves pretty slowly. And so it's not all doom and gloom, but we need to have realistic expectations, and we basically need to be prepared to extend the olive branch and say, I'm not going to bite your head off. Let's have a reasonable discussion. I'm not going to call you an idiot or a moron because you have a different viewpoint. As long as we can have a civil conversation, maybe we'll actually get somewhere. And so part of the issue is recognizing that we need to do our part, to go out and put ourselves out there and maybe be willing to have people throw call names at us, have people say things to us that we just, like, no, that's all right. Have a reasonable discussion. All right, still waiting. Have a reasonable discussion. All right, like, I know that sort of gets away from your confirmation bias, but it really, if you can have one, especially with reading things on the internet, right? Reading things on the internet is right. If I see an article that espouses a viewpoint that I don't want to hear about, oh yeah, it's easy to go to another site that's going to tell me what I want to hear. It's different if you can interact with people in public. It's in real life, right? And this is sort of where it really makes sense to have a relationship with the company. Because when you're faced with somebody one-on-one, it's a lot harder to just sort of blow them off or ignore them if they're willing to present a cogent argument. If they're willing to have present themselves as a reasonable human being, right? It's a lot harder for that confirmation bias to really take hold in that environment. I think that's my opinion.
Do you have any advice for how we as scientists can get better at communicating what we do with the general public?
So I think a really good place to start that is underappreciated is talking to scientists outside other scientists outside your own field, right? I don't know, what area of research are you in? What do you do?
Somewhat like chemical biology, natural product research.
Okay, all right. So like I have a general sense, biomedical, I have a general sense of what you do, but I'm pretty sure that if you started talking to me about the nitty-gritty of your research, I would be lost. And so start with the people who are in your school. Start with the people that you already have access to, and just practice, right? And sort of tell me why I should care about your research. And we did this in one seminar at this conference, actually 2 seminars. And basically within like 30 minutes, it was incredible the amount of feedback that I got from other people who were also graduate students, but who weren't in engineering, who weren't in a biological field, right? In terms of how do I present my research? I work with people who have spinal cord injury, and I talk about, so neurology and yada yada. It would be really helpful if you presented your research in a way that emphasizes that these people need independence, right? Use words that people can relate to, that really resound with, like, I think independence is the one that really stuck with me, right? You're trying to improve people's quality of life. What does that even mean? What does that look like? And so, be willing to talk to other people who you already have access with about your research in a more general way than trying to convince them on like the specific details. And that's just a really good place to start. And also, we can volunteer at the Science Center, right? Volunteering at the Science Center, volunteering at museums is a really good place to just interact with the public and get practice with sort of what is the base level of knowledge, right? What is the, and I basically took 28% of Americans are scientifically literate. Okay, so it seems like maybe we need to dumb down things a lot. But people will get really offended if they detect that you're like talking to them like a camera. They will get really offended if they feel like you're dumbing it down too much. And so it really helps to just sort of interact with people, and it'll give you a better sense of how to gauge where to meet them. Right? And just because something is your job, this is a hard thing to do, make something complicated seem simple. Right? If you watch ballerinas, right, they are doing this incredibly technically complex dance move that they make it look easy. Right? And so people think, oh, I can do that, no way. Right? It takes them hours and hours and hours and hours of practice to be able to do this. It's going to take you a lot of practice to be able to make it look easy, to make it look like, oh yeah, I can just explain my science to anybody. It's not easy. It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of work. But if you start with the basics, right? So go to seminars, other people's departments and talk to them, and just volunteer. So science days, right? If there's a science day at the university, just hang out with the kids, hang out with their parents, ask them why they came. Why did you take time out of your day to come to the science day, right? Why, and if you can inflame some sort of interest in people, then that's sort of what I'm really looking for, is to like be able to reach people who maybe have some sort of interest in it. If there are people who are like, oh, science is terrible, right? Like that's a whole other group of people that I don't want to reach. But if there are people who are just intimidated, right? Who think science is interesting but don't think that it's within their grasp. They don't think that it's within their reach, right? It's sort of like the kids who say, I'm bad at math. Right? Oh, I'm bad at science. I'll never be able to understand science. It's like, no, really. Like, you need to at least be able to understand the basics. Let me help.